All right, welcoming you into the Tribe Time Now podcast, episode number 20. Tonight I am joined by the ever all-encompassing great commentator, Jim Pete from Everybody Hates Cleveland. Jim, how are you?
Doing really well today.
I was about to say, today is a good day. I wanted to take the first couple seconds here to just thank you for filling in for me. Last week I had a lot on my plate, and you came in, and you were with Mike Brandyberry, right?
Yeah, it was me and Mike.
Yeah, as I say, you and Mike came in. You guys handled your business. It was a great podcast. I'm very, very fortunate to have people like you to fall back on when things get a little crazy on my end. So if you haven't listened to episode 19 of the Tribe Time Now podcast, make sure you head over to tribetimenow.com, click on Tribe Time Now main podcast, and check it out. It was a really good one. I particularly enjoyed listening to it at work the next day on Friday. It was Friday. Yeah, it was Friday.
Yeah.
So we're recording this on Thursday evening after the Indians swept the Rays, to give you an idea, and they get the 4-game sweep. The offense looked really good. The starting pitching in particular, was dynamite. Is from where we were after the Baltimore series, which I don't think just in terms of everything, you couldn't be any lower. And then you kind of come out and you sweep the Rays, who they're not like this powerhouse team. It's not the Tigers when they're 500 ball anyway, but it's not the Royals. It's not like the Giants. It's not the Nationals. But you go out and you beat a team into the ground. It was pretty embarrassing for them. A near perfect game, almost no hitter last night down to the last strike. Just kind of talk to me about the last series. Whatever you want to talk about, pitching, hitting, whatever.
Well, there are a lot of there's a lot of directions you could go with this one, but I'm going to start maybe in a place that you don't expect. I made kind of a glib comment after Monday night's game, saying that Cody Anderson was the new stopper, and it's his second start, dominant in both, perfect game into the 7th inning, to be broken up by Grady Sizemore, but I'm sure we'll get there in a few. I said that as a joke, and what followed was perfect game through 5 with Salazar, perfect game through 7, no-hitter through 9 2/3 with Carrasco. And while we didn't have to worry about that perfect game no-hitter today with Kluber's first inning, and I'm sure we'll get into that as well, again, another dominant start by Kluber today. I guess throwing it back to you, I'm intrigued with this rotation, as everybody else is, but I always like to see one-upmanship, and I think over the past 2 years we've seen that time and time again with this rotation, starting at the tail end of 2013 with Ubaldo and Salazar and Kazmir, so on and so forth, Masterson. I think what do you think? I mean, did the rookie come up here and I don't want to say wake these guys up, because this rotation is fantastic. But after losing 3 in a row, the way we did to Baltimore, what do you think, Rob? I mean, is Cody Anderson like that guy that Danny Salazar was in 2013 when he came up in August? Did he wake people up? I mean, are we seeing like this domino effect with this rotation? Because we saw 4 just dominant performances, and Trevor Bauer has to be sitting there thinking, why can't I figure out a way to get a start?
Here's my thought on Cody Anderson, and it's kind of matches Danny Salazar. It even matches Carrasco a couple years ago. I think the real issue with all 3 of these pitchers is they need time to develop consistency. Obviously with Kluber, he came out today, he pitched 8 innings, he gave up 7 hits, had 3 earned runs, and he had 14 strikeouts. That's a Kluber-esque performance. You're going to get that type of performance on probably 8 out of 10 days. Probably 40 or 80% of the time, you're going to get that kind of performance out of Kluber. But when you look at Danny Salazar, maybe last year or when he got called up, he would either go out, and I remember the Detroit game, and Jake from More Than Fan and I, we always talk about this. He goes out and strikes Miguel Cabrera out 3 times and then gives up a home run, right? So there's this consistency issue where he has this very good start and he has a really bad start, really good start and a bad start, and it's kind of this wave. So Cody Anderson comes out and pitches 2 really decent starts. So specifically the last one was just a really good start. He had command of his pitches. He was moving the ball around. He was making the hitters think a lot. Okay, so I want to see him continue to do that over the next maybe 4 starts. If I can see a consistent Cody Anderson, I'll be a little more, I guess, pleased with his development. Again, speaking relative to what we've seen in the past. So that's kind of my thought. And you brought up Ubaldo too. In 2013, he had a really bad first half, right?
Yep.
And then he was consistently bad for the first half. And then the second half, he was consistently good. So while we didn't have a yo-yo effect that was, up and down over, 1 or 2 starts, it was kind of flat, and then he rose up to the occasion. So I'm hoping that Cody Anderson, doesn't have like 6 decent starts and then just falls off in August or something like that. So it's yet to be seen. Again, small sample size with 2 starts. Talk to me in the middle of August if he's still in the rotation and pitching well.
Well, and he's only pitched against one team, to be fair. And we were talking off air about Tampa, and while they are close to first place in the East, suspect hitting, of course. But I'm more in tune with kind of this back-to-back kind of thing. Rather than looking at the rotation like over the long haul, do you see this rotation, as brilliant as they are, literally competing against each other from night to night? Is that what we saw here against Tampa? I just, I've never seen. I mean, we were perfect through 5, 3 straight days, perfect through 7, 2 out of the 3. And then Kluber gets lit up in the first inning and then throws 14 Ks, which was almost a matter of fact. I mean, just from week to week, is this the kind of rotation where these guys are going to keep trying to one-up themselves? And really, with the way the season has gone so far, that's kind of what we need them to do, isn't it?
Well, I think, yeah. I honestly think that let me put it this way. I think on the inside, I'm sure that Trevor Bauer is trying to pitch better than, Carlos Carrasco. I'm sure he's trying to pitch better than Cody. He knows he can pitch better than Cody Anderson. So I'm sure there's an inner competition, but I think it drives them to be better overall. I just lost my train of thought.
Yeah. Well, the kind of the domino effect from night to night with the different pitchers. Trevor Bauer going tomorrow. Do they pitch better because the night before was such a good performance?
I'm sure it pushes them to do it, but each game is individual. There's different conditions. While the lineups are generally the same, even Carlos Carrasco last night in the post-game interview, he said, like, oh, yeah, Danny Salazar told me, like, hey, make sure after you pitch a fastball, this guy, you throw a breaking ball. So I'm sure that the pitching, and you can probably someone can look at this, that pitching at the end of a series maybe has a little more of an edge than maybe the first run through on the first night that you play a series. So I'm sure they build on each other. But again, we said the Rays, they're not a very dynamic hitting team in the grand scheme of things. So I want to see this play out maybe and in a couple other series, specifically this weekend. And I'm blanking right now. I just have so much on my mind. But so we've got till next week for the All-Star break, and I just continue into the All-Star break with the kind of pitching we're seeing. Give your guys a chance to hit you into the win column.
Well, the fun thing about it too, Ryan, is that we've got this series over the weekend with the Pirates in Pittsburgh. Pirates are playing great baseball now, and of course, Cleveland fan, of course, with Pittsburgh. The Pirates aren't really a rival, but this might give us maybe our first big series heading towards that. I mean, do you think that this is I guess for me, like, what is this team really? I mean, we've got a home record of 15-23. We're 22-18 on the road. A lot of our losses, though, are against the Tigers. We're 3-9 against the Tigers. Who is this team? What are we going to see this weekend? I mean, is this the start of something? Are we finally seeing the hitting wake up, or was it this trip to Tampa, this like vacation to Florida?
To be honest, I think something you can tell when you watch this team play. Something happened between Baltimore and Tampa Bay. I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was Terry Francona going out and yelling at the umpire and saying some choice words. I don't know if it was the meeting that Kipnis talked about that they had, where everybody was in there and they were just saying, and Brandon Moss, I think, said in the same meeting, like, we lost our heart. Maybe they found their heart. Maybe something clicked for this team, and you can tell the pitching has been fantastic. I don't think that's a matter of luck. These are professional athletes. There's a lot of skill and a little bit of luck. As you go down the line in the minors and then like softball, which I played, it's more luck than it is talent. So
sure,
something clicked for these guys. And as you go into the weekend, we'll talk. I want to talk a little bit about the Central for the National League. The NL Central is a good division at the top.
Yep.
Okay, the Cardinals, for those of you who are not paying attention, the Cardinals are 51-26. I think that might be the best record in baseball. It is the best.
Yeah, 662. Yeah, that's the best.
Yeah, so they're the best record in baseball. They're the Cardinals. They always play well. They're probably cheating with the computers, though. The Pirates are behind them by 6.5 games, and they're 45-33.
Yeah.
Which, okay, when you look at all the other teams in the majors, that might be first in almost maybe 2/3 of the remaining divisions, if not tied for first, or maybe a very, very close second.
Yeah.
So the Pirates are a very good baseball team. The Indians have to go into their house, close to home. If they can win, they can sweep the series. That's a statement series before the All-Star break. If they can win the series 2 out of 3, that's great. I think if you drop 2 or you get swept by the Pirates, again, we kind of fall into that rut where there's this consistency issue of runs. Not runs is what you score, but like runs in baseball in terms of wins. I think you get a run of wins into the All-Star break. That's huge for your team's confidence coming out of it.
Yeah, well, and I think the interesting piece to all of this is in almost every podcast from week to week, every one of our hosts and co-hosts have been talking about roster configuration. I think the thing that I like the best is our roster right now is pretty tight, with the possible exception of center field. I think that we have the roster that we wanted in April, and having up here and having Lindor up here, and then having a number 5 starter who has shown 2 games of consistency, I think has kind of solidified everything across the board. I think we're waiting for the hitting to be a lot more fluid, but we saw, as you mentioned, we saw Moss hit very well, coming up with a big double a couple nights ago. We played very well today. Kipnis, of course, is just off the charts, even though he's got to get put into the All-Star game by the manager, but that's for another story. And the hitting's better than what we've seen. The roster looks good. I mean, so, the big question out there is the one piece left to fix. Will they fix it? Will they do anything with that outfield? But I really like this roster. I think if this momentum can keep going, I think the talent level, as we've said from the start, is there for this team to logistically make the playoffs. I can't say win the division yet, but when Mike and I were talking last week, this team was, I want to say, 9 games out. At the end of the the Baltimore series, they were 12 games out. Today, you look at the standings, they're 8.5 games out. If they can win most of the games before the break, they're not that far out of it. So perhaps the division is still in hand. We were again talking about this off air, but this is a standings that I think, at least in the AL Central, I think we could see a lot of shuffling going on. I mean, it's still up in the air, don't you think?
Oh, yeah. Central, among some of the other divisions, I don't have them up in front of me right now, but the AL Central is really close. I think what the Indians have to do is focus on, look, we can't control the other teams. We can only control what we do. Unless we're playing in division, you got to look next man up in the sense that, okay, look, we're in 4th place right now. Who's above us? Well, Detroit is, and they're 2 games ahead of us. They're 500 right now.
500, yeah.
Yeah, which that's another story. But okay, so let's get above Detroit. Let's work on doing that. When we get above Detroit, we can look at Minnesota. And then once we get above Minnesota, then we have the Royals in front of us, right? So I think that's how they have to take this on and just focus on winning games and doing the small things right. If they start to get wide-eyed and look at the whole division in front of them and say, oh, we're 8.5 games out for the Royals, I think that's going to be potentially problematic for them coming into the dog days and into August, near the stretch run there for the playoffs.
Yeah. Well, this is going to be a fun ride. I hope. I don't know who's going for the Pirates. I'll have to look that up here in a second. But we get to the All-Star break. I mean, obviously, we talked about roster a second ago. Do you see them making any moves? I mean, I don't want to get into this talk yet before the All-Star break, but can they overcome this Michael Bourne problem that they have?
It's an interesting position to be in, I think, if you're the Indians front office. I think not you and I, but I think myself and Mike Brandyberry talked about potential center fielders to maybe go after at the trade deadline. I feel like they're going to stand pat at the deadline. I don't know. They don't really need to go after any pitching. I think they may just hold out on Michael Bourn. Unfortunately, I think it's time. The best maybe addition by subtraction in that they DFA him. And that's, they're going to get rid of him, but they still have to pay him. So it's kind of a weird position to be in. But I think if you pay him and, let him go, you're saving yourself some defensive runs. You can put somebody in there that will give you a chance on the offensive side of the ball. I think anybody's really an upgrade at center field as long as it's not Mike Aviles or David Murphy or Brandon Moss. I mean, obviously those, 2-3 of those guys aren't going to play center field, but I think you need somebody that can save you some defensive runs, can range to the areas Michael Brantley and Brandon Moss specifically. Brandon Moss can't get to him. So I guess we'll see. I don't really know any center fielders on the market. I guess I'd have to look at teams that are looking to sell. And I
probably the big name that's out there right now that's been thrown around over the past couple days. And Hattery and I were talking about this, and you immediately look to the Brewers because they're so bad.
That's what I was going to say.
Is Cargo, and there's a lot of interesting questions about him. He's been hurt for much of the season. He's playing actually pretty well right now. But you're looking at right now. I mean, he's played in, I think, a little more than half their games. He's already like one and a half WAR, and this is a guy I think just by being on the field offensively makes the team a lot better. And while he's not a premier defensive player, I think Bourn has taken so many steps back. I think you immediately get an upgrade defensively. The problem I see right now with the Indians is, what are they going to give up to get a guy like Cargo? I mean, you're looking at a 29-year-old, and I don't know. I don't have his contract sitting in front of me, but, are they going to I think he's got a year left. I mean, are the Indians going to give up this minor league system that they've been doing such a nice job rebuilding? Are they going to give up a serious piece or two, which is, Milwaukee from that CC Sabathia deal? They're not just going to ask for one guy. Is he really worth it? I mean, when you have a guy – so what's more valuable? Making a deal, losing some valuable assets that may come into play 2 years from now or even a year from now, or letting go of Bourn and just bringing up a guy like Holt or bringing up a guy like Ramsey or even a guy like Tyler Naquin? I think defensively, all three of those guys immediately make this team better.
Well, I think Holt's your, if you can't go out and get somebody because the team you're trading with requires too much of your farm system, I think the first guy you go out and get is Holt. I think that he's ready in terms of experience. I'd love to see Naquin up here, but I just think he needs a little more incubation. So yeah, I'd like to see Holt just because of the defensive presence that he has. As I say, I think Brandyberry and I are kind of high on Holt. There's somebody else. I think it was Joe Koblitz of Burning River Baseball. I think he's pretty high on him too.
Yeah.
So yeah, again, offensively, I don't know if he's going to do much, but if he can save you some defensive runs, that's big, especially in center field. It's a lot of ground to cover.
Well, and he can, and then the interesting thing about Holt and covering him in Carolina, I got to talk to him quite a bit. If you want to talk, a lot of discussion about Terry Francona. If you want to talk about a Francona guy, I don't know that there's anybody in baseball who better fits a Francona guy than Holt. A fiery guy. He can play all three outfield positions above average. And offensively, his floor is not so low and his ceiling's not so high. I mean, you're going to get a guy who eventually gets on base. But again, that's just him being on the field makes the team better. And he's a scrappy guy. I mean, this is a guy, he's got major league experience. He played great last year. This logjam with Bourn, though, it's just killing me.
And it really is. I'm just trying to pull up some stats on Holt. Let's see. In 2014, he had 36 games of experience. He ended up hitting nearly 270 while he was here. He had 19 hits. So I mean, again, a very small sample size. In 2015, he's only had 2 games and he's only had 3 at bats. So really not much to go on in terms of major league experience. But yeah, I think anybody's an upgrade. Go ahead.
Yeah, his knock has always been strikeouts. He strikes out a lot. He'll have games where he strikes out 4 times. But if you look at his past 2 or 3 seasons in the minors, at least, this is a guy who, kind of like Giovanni Urshela, who you see has improved approach. Again, this isn't major league. It's not major league sample size, but you saw a glimpse of that last year. I guess, if the Indians are worried about money, which we know they always are, that front office always is. I mean, they're not going to. I don't think just dump $14 million, but, when does it – I mean, if he's a part-time player anyways, why don't you just go ahead and make the move? I guess, are they willing to do that? I don't know. I'm lost. I really am at a loss for words because I just don't know that, what I'd love to see them do is just say goodbye, but that's a lot of money for this front office in this market to say goodbye to.
No, they might just if the front office is going to ask Terry Francona to do anything, and I mean, I think Tito's pretty, he's obviously an astute manager. It might just be one of those things where you put a towel over him and put him on the shelf and forget about him for a while. If he's not on the field, if he's not playing, then he can't, do anything. It's kind of like, what is that? Is it The Natural? When Pop won't start Roy Hobbs.
Yeah.
It's not The Natural. It's I got my bad.
No, you're right. It's The Natural. That guy that was in center field. He ends up running through the wall and dying.
Pop won't let him hit. He just makes him sit on the bench, and he's sitting there. He's ready to hit. Maybe it's not like Bourne's that kind of player, but maybe it'll be kind of the opposite, where it's like Tito's like, hey man, you're not doing it, and we can't get rid of you. But then you come into the idea that, like, okay, he's just sitting on the bench, so he's not contributing on the field. What's the difference between that and DFAing him? Sure, we're still paying him regardless, but at least we have a roster spot open. We can bring somebody up on the 25-man.
Right. Well, yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying, I guess you run into that issue too. It's like, what's the difference if he's on the bench or on the street?
Well, there's the conundrum, because I think the thing that frustrates everybody the most right now with this team is when you see Aviles penciled into the outfield. And listen, I mean, Aviles was a very maligned player earlier on in the season, mostly because of the way Francona was using him. The flip side to that is, what's their choice when you have Murphy, Rayburn, you have Swisher, you have Moss, at the time Sands, you have all of these kind of players that are stuck playing right field or DHing, and then you have Bourne in center who's not playing well. You don't really have a choice but to put Aviles in the outfield if some of these other guys are hurt, like Swisher, for example. So I guess, make Aviles the guy that he is, and that's the thing with Bourne. I don't want him sitting on the bench, because if you sit him on the bench, then, well, I guess then he becomes Aviles in the outfield. But is that really what you want? I don't know. I guess, here I thought we were going to be all, it's my fault, but it's the one I was talking earlier today with some guys at my site about, that's the one part of this team that annoys me right now. If they could just get out from under this rock, I think then you have a roster that you can't make excuses for. And right now you still have that, Aviles was out and left today, and, of course, you get onto Twitter, and that's like a bunch of landmines anyways, but, he's out there in left field, and, he shouldn't be out there. I mean, let's be honest, but that's just the roster that we have.
Well, that too, and hey, if you did a manual job, a job with manual labor, if I ask you to go, baseball players don't get the weekend off like you and me. Well, you get the whole summer off, but whatever. When Joe Schmo worker, goes out and works 5 days a week, in office and comes home, you're not exerting yourself. You're not, crouching. You're not bending. You're not sweating. You're not running. Michael Brantley is out there almost every day, running, sweating, hitting, catching, diving, sliding. Okay, guy needs a break. That's just the way it is sometimes. Sometimes you have to put your second or third, or, well, in this case, sixth best option out there. And just to give some guy I want Michael Brantley to be healthy throughout the season. If that means Mike Aviles has one getaway day game in left field when Kluber's on the mound, so be it. I do not care. It is the way baseball is played. It's a 162-game season. You either deal with that and understand that, or you just don't really get baseball. And I'm not saying you don't get baseball or doesn't get baseball. It's just my opinion on that.
Well, no. I thoroughly agree. I think Aviles, I mean, for one thing, I mean he gets a bad knock. He's good at what he does. I know a lot of people didn't want him to they didn't want him to get his option picked up, but he is. We've had players like him before in the Pat. Jamie Carroll is a guy like him, a guy who can kind of play all over the place. I like Aviles a lot. He's put into positions, I think, sometimes where, you put him out in center field, you bat him lead off or you bat him second. Of course, that's going to magnify it. This is a guy who should play 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 times a week, who should probably be in the infield. And if he's in the outfield, should get protected, playing left or right. And it's a small knock. I just think if they could, or if Bourne could figure out a way to play. But I guess the last question, and we can leave Bourne in the dust here, is there a chance that Michael Bourne can ever be at least an average Major League Baseball player? I mean, that's all we really need. But I think he's done.
Yeah, I think he was brought in a couple of years ago on the idea that, man, if he could play like he did in 2008 or 2012, right? He was brought in the sense that, he can be that guy. I'm not trying to make the comparison to Kenny Lofton, but, he can play, center field really well for us. He can cover a lot of ground. He can get on base. He can
spark
steal.
plug.
Right.
Yeah.
He can be that guy to get us going. And he's not – and baseball players, he's not a young player, but he's not old in that sense either. I just think his body's just telling him it's time to hang it up. And unfortunately for both the Swisher contract and the Bourne contract, they're really back-ended. No one is going to take the Bourne contract. Like the Phillies might be the only team to do it, but that's because they're stupid.
Yeah, I know, and we don't have Seattle to pick on anymore.
Yeah, like Seattle's been a pretty decent trading partner. Even the Cardinals, I think, over the past couple of years, we've done some deals with them.
Yeah.
As well. So I mean, but they've got really smart front offices. If Shapiro or Chris Antonetti called any of the GMs on the deadline day and said, "Hey, we'll give you the Bourne contract and $2 million in cash if you take them off our hands and give us like a double A guy," like they'd still oh wow, that'd be a great deal. They'd still wouldn't do it.
I know. That's the bad. I mean, there probably was a time when Bourne could have been moved. The problem then was, even if you go back to the middle of last year, Holt, again, 30-some games last year, you didn't really have a replacement for him. And now we do. I mean, even beyond Holt, you could probably plug a Ramsey in as your fourth outfielder or as a center fielder defensively. They just didn't have those choices last year. So now here we are with Swisher, who has, I don't know if he has body parts that work anymore, and Bourne is just a slow center fielder who can't hit. Perfect. So, but let's move away from that. I apologize to everybody listening to this. I'm sorry. We just won 4 in a row, and we have this cool stretch of games coming up. We've got Pittsburgh, we've got Houston, a 4-game set with Houston, which could be interesting. And then we have Oakland, which should be a lot of fun. And that's a lot of games left between here and now. Do you worry about Houston?
Well, hey, you know what? If you've ever seen a team play out of their butt, it's Houston this year. Houston, Minnesota just surprised the heck out of me. They weren't even on my radar this year. Actually, Houston was on my radar to be the worst team in baseball.
Yeah.
Maybe tied with the Phillies. And, they're just playing, really good baseball. Keuchel is, I think, he's a shadowy Cy Young candidate. He's giving me that Shades of Kluber 14 vibe. If he can continue what he's doing, get some more wins. He's just very dominant every time he comes out. They're playing really decent baseball right now, and I hope they're not a buzzsaw for the Indians. I think you can figure them out. We're the only team, or we were the only team up through like mid-June to beat them in a series. Like I think they won all their series except for the opening series against the Indians. Or something. It was some asinine figure like that.
Yeah, it was something like that. I saw that.
Right. So I'm figuring, first series jitters. It's the beginning of the season. Anything can happen, kind of deal. But I think after the Pirates, you got to look at Houston and say like, oh man, this is a rough week. And Oakland, I mean, they've been playing decently recently, if I can remember correctly. So you get 3 pretty decent, tough teams coming up, and I think the goal is to sweep every series. Is that realistic? Probably not. A more realistic goal is to win all the series, maybe not sweep them. And then probably the most realistic goal is that you're going to take 2 or 3 series. If you keep playing at the level you're playing at, if the pitching continues to go deep, gives up, not a lot of hits, keeps the ball low. Again, while this team, kind of moving over to that pitching realm specifically, this team is obviously a strikeout-heavy team. There's not a lot of finesse. They're not going to just soft toss the ball and
Right.
get ground outs, right?
Right.
They're going to strike you out. And if they don't strike you out, it's going to be a fly out. Do they give up a lot of home runs? Sure, but they have a lot of strikeouts too. So you take the good with the bad. Hopefully they can keep most of it in the ballpark. I'm not sure about the dimensions of PNC, but is that a hitter's ballpark?
I believe it is. Yeah, it's. I'm pretty sure it's a hitter's ballpark. I remember last year when Burnett left and went to Philadelphia. I remember there was some talk about the reason. Maybe part of the reason was that he gave up maybe more home runs in Pittsburgh than he had in the past. I'm not 100% sure on that, but it's. I don't know that it's as much a pitcher's park or hitter's park that it makes too big of a difference. The dimensions are, I think, pretty similar to Cleveland, which would lean it towards being a pitcher's park. But I don't think it's going to be dramatically in the favor of one or the other. What I like about it is that it's an away game, to be perfectly honest with you. I don't care dimensions. The Indians are just playing really good baseball away from Progressive Field.
Which sucks for the home crowd, but hey, you know what? A win's a win, in my opinion. I got a TV. I can manage listening to Rick Manning and Matt Underwood. I can deal with it as long as it's a win. I don't care who's talking about it. I don't care if I'm there or not.
Yeah, well, see, that's and at the end of the day, I what do you make of that? I mean, this Jacobs Field, Progressive Field used to be this place that team. I mean, and of course we can. I don't want to get. I don't even want to talk about attendance. But what is it about? Why can't we win at home? Is it just Detroit?
Honestly, I may be in the minority here. I don't really believe in the home field advantage. I'd have to look at the data from a lot of sports to, I guess, make that decision. But I think it's a matter of who you play. I haven't really seen looked at specifically home game versus away games, but if we're playing really good teams at home, sometimes it just happens. Sometimes you get beat by a good team at home. In the same way, if you go on the road and you play Houston, Philadelphia, and then I don't know, the Milwaukee, 3 straight series on the road, and you go 9-0, that's because you played 3 really bad teams in a row. At the same time, you could be home and play Kansas City, Houston, and then Oakland, or the Giants maybe if you're in the National League or something like that. 3 really good teams. Maybe you go 2-7. It's just a matter, I think, of who you're playing and if you're in a streak or somebody's hot. So yeah, I don't think it's if you put 42,000, well, not 42, if you put 35,000 people in there now. I don't know if that changes the aspect of the game. I think the Indians would have the same record, if not maybe slightly better, maybe 2-3 games more. So yeah, how do you feel about the home field advantage? Do you believe in it, or do you think it's more of a fan's myth?
Well, it depends on who you talk to. If you look at the statistics over the years, most sabermetric folk will tell you that park factor is more in tune with dimensions than with fans. You go back to 2013, Indians run off 10 in a row. Stadium not full, but running close to 30,000 per game. Was that a factor? I don't know. When you grow up watching the 90s teams when the stadium was full all of the time, it can give you kind of a false sense of home field advantage because we won so many of those games. And I think looking at those statistics, obviously they're going to skew in the favor of winning. I am kind of with you. Obviously this Indians team this year is proving that. And, sometimes you just run into some teams that just have your number. And right now Detroit's that team, and they just seem to mop us at home. So I don't know. Those numbers kind of go back and forth from year to year. I'm looking at PNC this year. This year it looks like it's a pitcher's park. It's giving up, it looks like, yeah, it's on the lower end. It looks like a pitcher's park this year, whereas Progressive looks like a hitter's park this year. So and that's not normal. So, from year to year, who knows? A lot of it can be weather too. Like, it's one of those things that's so hard to measure. If a team's playing good, they win anywhere, like you were saying. And if a team's playing bad, they can, like the Indians did in Baltimore, they look terrible, and that was on the road. So.
Well, yeah, and just to speak briefly about Baltimore. So Baltimore goes in, they just kill us. They win 3, right?
Yeah.
Texas comes into Baltimore, and the Baltimore gets swept. So
Right.
again, it's just this. Any day that you take the diamond, anything can happen. You can go out and throw a perfect game. You can go out and give up 10 runs. It's a matter of your talent, your luck, a little bit of luck, all thrown into one, and some extraneous factors like weather, park advantages, etc. So, I'm a stats guy. I really enjoy the sabermetric approach to baseball, but at the same time, I understand that you can only predict, with statistics about 90% of the game. The other 10% is just stochasticity, the signal and the noise, as Nate Silver calls it. So, you like to hedge your bets on it's kind of like the better's what's it called, the better's fallacy or something like that. Yeah. So like you want to hedge your bets retrospectively, looking at the team before, but each case is a new spin of the wheel, or a roll of the dice, as they say. So the odds are nearly the same across time, and odds of winning one don't affect the other. Kind of looking at it from a game theory approach. I don't want to get too deep into that. That could get boring for some people.
Well, it's all intriguing to me. From year to year, as you look at, especially the Indians, they vary from so much from year to year. And I think the nice thing about, I don't know, the Francona effect, or whatever you want to call it, maybe just a lot of talent coming up at the right time. The interesting thing about the past 3 seasons, 2.5 really, is that we've seen a much more consistent Indians team. And while they're, for much of the season, one win, seems like every win was followed by a loss, especially at the beginning of the year, I think we're starting to see that ship righted. What do you think about the pitching matchups? I mean, we've got, without looking too deep into the Pirates, we've got perhaps our least solid starters. We've got Bauer going tomorrow night. We've got Anderson going Saturday, and then Salazar on Sunday. Probably the 3, 4, 5 guys for the Indians right now. Does that worry you at all? What am I coming off of 4 games against Tampa? I don't know what I'm talking about.
Well, yeah, and then it's like I'm thinking like, oh, well, retrospectively, I'm going to look at it like that. Cody Anderson had 2 really good starts. His third one should be fine. Again, kind of changing gears. We're shifting away from a Tampa Bay team that's not very dynamic in terms of hitting. They run the base well. You go into somewhere like Pittsburgh, obviously they're winning games. McCutchen is a threat every time he comes to the plate and every time he gets on base. And then I don't really know the Pittsburgh lineup, and that's just, a matter of them being in the National League that, I just don't know it that well. But I think this is a challenge for our bottom of the rotation guys. I think Bauer will be fine. I think Cody Anderson may have a tough go just because this is a better team. They can hit well. I want to see what he does against a National League team. Not that a National League team is any different than an American League team in terms of composition, but the way they play is a little different. The National League obviously is known as the small ball league. They manufacture runs, but the American League started to take that idea, and I look at the Joe Madden Rays, or not Joel Madden, I'm sorry, Joe Madden Rays, as a team that kind of were run manufacturers, kind of took on the NL persona, and teams like San Francisco, they kind of were power hitting for a while, and the Cardinals, obviously, they hit for power. They kind of remind you of an American League team. So, again, not a lot of difference across leagues, I think, anymore. But I think Cody Anderson will be challenged. I think Salazar will be fine. I think I want to look at maybe the Pittsburgh pitchers against the Indians. I think Garrett Cole, again, he was a really touted guy, and then he really haven't heard much from him. So I don't really know how he's doing this season, but I think he could be an issue on Sunday.
11 and 3 with a 2.2 ERA. Again, wins aren't really a whole big deal, but you see that low ERA, and I don't have his 2.64 FIP. I mean, so he's having a crazy good year right now. Burnett, do we face Burnett? He's playing out of his mind.
No, I don't. I looked at the probable starters, and it was two guys that I really never heard of before, and then Cole on Sunday. So
Yeah, so probably Morton, Locke, and Cole.
yeah,
Yeah. So, but the thing is their rotation right now. So we're facing two guys with ERAs over 4, with Phipps close to 4, and then Garrett Cole, who is fantastic. Right now, one of those guys that probably would look really good with the Indians rotation right now. But this will be a fun little matchup, and I again, I hate to fall back on these old standards, but it's always fun playing Pittsburgh in anything. So it'll be a fun series. Hopefully, if we get 2 out of 3 here, I'll be ecstatic. If we can sweep the Pirates. If we can run this record, if we can run the streak to 7, I hate to pull out the old Major League quotes with Lou Brown talking about you win this game and then you win the next, but it's one of those things where if they can win tomorrow, if Bauer can come out and give us a start like the Bauer from earlier in the year, and we can win tomorrow night to get us 5 in a row, I am, again, I come back to that initial comment with Cody Anderson, the stopper. They've never seen him. I mean, you're already talking about the Pirates who don't see the Indians much. This is a guy they haven't seen, and again, we've got that X factor with Anderson right now, where you have a guy who throws a lot of strikes, and he's got decent velocity. This isn't a guy who just lobs it up there. If we can win, Bauer can come in and pitch well tomorrow night. It could get really interesting over the weekend.
Well, and that's kind of T.J. House had a pretty an average year, maybe a little bit above average year last year. Just because no one ever seen him before.
Yeah.
So then he comes in this year, and he's having issues, and it could be a control issue. But honestly, I think teams had tape on him. They could watch him. They could see what he does. They could see it. Yeah. So again, Cody Anderson does have the advantage in that he's only 2 starts into his major league career, especially against an NL team. So maybe a team like if we face the Rays again or the Tigers, we're obviously going to see the AL Central. He inevitably, if he continues to pitch well, is going to get a start against this AL Central. So they're going to have film on him, and they're going to kind of know him the next time he comes around. So I think Anderson does have the advantage. He needs to take it. I think obviously got a chance to win tomorrow night if Bauer can figure it out and get things going. Cody Anderson, he has kind of the kind of the surprise attack in the sense that he's fresh and there's not much around about him other than the scouting report. And then you gotta run it in the buzzsaw that is Garrett Cole on Sunday. You need Salazar to pitch well, and you got to minimize your errors. You're not going to get many chances against Garrett Cole offensively, so you have to make sure defensively that you don't give the Pirates ample opportunity to score. And with somebody like McCutchen, that guy gets on base, whether it's a walk or a hit, he's going to steal. He can steal, and he will get himself in a position so one of his teammates can drive him in.
Yeah, well, you hit the nail on the head. When you talk about Cody Anderson, and I don't want to talk too much about this because one of my writers has a good piece on this coming out tomorrow. But the interesting thing about Anderson is you're looking at a ground ball dominant pitcher. He's been a ground ball dominant pitcher since I saw him in Carolina. This is a guy who, had he have come up last year, had he have not struggled last year, and maybe made that move up to the rotation last year instead of House, which could have happened, he would have run into trouble because our shortstop and third baseman looked a lot different last year. The interesting thing about this team right now as it's constructed, about the Indians as it's constructed, is in Kipnis, who's playing out of his mind both offensively and defensively right now. Lindor, who, it's unfortunate he had that error yesterday because he had made so many fantastic plays. Of course, you had some people hanging on that error. And Urshela, these are guys that if a ground ball's coming their way, they're making the play. And you can say what you want about Santana, and he booted a ball and almost got to another ball today that ended up costing them a run, but I don't know that it was his fault. You've got this kind of shift in dynamics of this team and this roster construction that we were so worried about in April and May, where a guy like Cody Anderson can succeed because he stays low in the zone. He hits his marks, and he's always been good at that. Where he struggled last year is he wasn't hitting his marks. This isn't a guy who strikes out a lot. He only had 2 strikeouts in that perfect game run he had on Monday. This team is very much different, and it doesn't really help out a guy like Salazar who gives up a lot of fly balls. But when you talk about a guy like Trevor Bauer, you talk about a guy like Cody Anderson, some of these ground ball dependent pitchers, this team changes the dynamics of who they are.
Yeah, well, the issue that we ran into at the beginning of the season was this team has the potential to be an offensive threat. They will be a pitching threat with the starters. But how many runs are they going to give up defensively in terms of errors and just lack of solid defensive play? That was the question coming into the season. Well, and the latter, I guess, wasn't a question. It was a certainty. This team will give up defensive runs because they're not a defensive team. I think with the additions of Lindor and Urshela, we've kind of changed the dynamic. That left side of the infield, it's a trap. You're not going to get through there like you were maybe when Lonnie and J-Ram were here. I think, like we talked about before, we don't really need to get into it again, but Michael Bourn is the linchpin in turning this team's defensive characteristics around, kind of like who they are as a defensive team. I think if you replace Michael Bourn with someone that has a little more range and is a little quicker, it can play center field with a little more pep, you've figured this team out. I tell you what, Brantley, Holt, Moss, Santana, Kipnis, Lindor, Urshela, and Gomes. That's pretty decent. That's a pretty decent defensive squad.
Decent to spectacular, with maybe a couple of guys slightly below, like a guy like Moss, but he's been playing pretty well. I don't have his defensive numbers up, but I've read some things that say that he's been a little bit above average this year. And then of course, I wrote a piece on Urshela 3 years ago talking about how good his defense was. This is a guy who's major league ready defensively forever, and you've seen. The plays that Lindor has made. The defensive factor that he adds to this team. It's just it's so good to see him up, and he's a game changer to me in a lot of different ways. I could go on and on about. We could run a whole show on Lindor. Maybe we will at some point, maybe in the off season. But Lindor could be just a game changer as it is. Just a whole different dynamic than J-Ram. J-Ram's as enigmatic a player as you can get, and this is no knock on him. This is just a guy. He doesn't speak the language really well, and he's eccentric. A friend of mine who used to write at IBI with me talked about him coming to the park one day in the summer with a fur coat on. He's just an enigmatic guy, and Lindor is just the opposite. This guy's a pro's pro, and Urshela's the same way. The dynamics of this team are just so different than they were 3 weeks ago.
Well, and I think with Lindor and Urshela, they've got a little bit of a bond. And
oh yeah,
you hope that your shortstop and your second baseman have they can read each other's mind. That's the dream right there. Because most of the balls are going to come to the second baseman or the shortstop. But even if the third baseman and the shortstop are thinking together as one, that gives them something. You can't prove it. You can't, write it out in terms of a formula, or there's no statistic to measure it. But when you got guys that can kind of read each other's movements and know what somebody's going to do in any certain situation, that gives you somewhat of a leg up. And then just to finish on what you were saying, between Lindor and J-Ram, if you have a ball like the one, there was a play the other night, Lindor ranges to his left, dives, gets the ball, he's up with it, he throws out the runner. It was a great play, shades of Omar's past. I think the difference is both guys can range to get that ball. The difference between the two is that Lindor will make a play on it, J-Ram will just stop the ball.
Yeah. Well, and you can talk about range, but where Lindor is different. You can talk about a lot of different things. He transfers his weight better quick twitch, transferring the ball from his glove to his hand, and then he's got a cannon for an arm. People don't. J-Ram has pluses defensively. He can be an above-average second baseman for sure, and last year proved that he can play shortstop, and you wonder how much he was pressing. But there are little things that Lindor does that J-Ram won't ever be able to do, the uncoachable things. Omar Vizquel, and I don't want to spend too much time on him, spent his whole youth, bouncing, a ball off a wall and playing off of rocks and stones, and Lindor has a very similar story. He just has instincts and does things the right way that you can't coach, and that's just a major difference. And then just watch an interview. The guy's fantastic on the interview. And just to kind of follow up what you were saying about these two, make sure Hayden Grove, one of our co-hosts, you got to read it. If you haven't read the piece he wrote about Urshela and Lindor, make sure you do that. Check it out on Indians on Scout. over at Scout.com. He wrote a fantastic piece on the bond that these two guys have had over the years. They've played together since Lake County, so it's a really good read and shows you exactly what Ryan was just talking about.
Well, that too, and I think if anybody has their ear to the ground in terms of those two, considering kind of the closeness that Hayden's had with them,
yep,
that's going to be the article to read. I have read it. It is a great piece. Again, go to IndiansBaseballInsider.com or Indians on Scout.com. Read that piece. It'll give you a little bit more of an insight to what Jim and I are talking about in terms of the relationship that Lindor and Urshela have, and maybe what that means in terms of an intangible. Again, speaking about intangibles in general and what they bring. If you have uncoachable instincts, that makes Terry Francona's job a lot easier. He does not have to worry about the difference in time between you thinking about making a play and then you making a play, which is huge. And I think maybe you have to worry about that with people like J. Ram and Lonnie Chisenhall. Not that they're not instinctual players, but I think Urshela and Lindor just have a little bit of an edge in terms of their upbringing.
Exciting edge too, and I it's going to be fun watching them. Health, God willing, they have health. We've got them locked for sure over the next 6 years, and maybe again a question for another podcast. Will they be wrapping these guys up to a long-term deal here pretty soon? But that's for another day, because that's a rabbit hole that we could end up talking for 2 hours about.
I was going to say yes. I think maybe I don't know if we'll have time at the roundtable, but I'd love to get into the Indians. The 2019 Indians. Like, what is that team going to look like? I know it's crazy. Again, I don't think we'll have time in the roundtable because we have so much to discuss because all of us haven't been together since the first round or the second roundtable we did. I kind of want to talk about so many things there. Again, that's going to be, I think, July 15th when we get the whole squad together and talk Tribe for a little longer than 50 minutes. But I think we're going to call it an evening with that little caveat about the roundtable number 3, the mid-season review. So again, I was joined tonight by Jim Pete of EverybodyHatesCleveland.com. Make sure you get there, read everything they're doing. I try and do it as much as I can when I get home from work, if I get home from work sometimes. If you're a teacher, you have off the entire summer, so you should have tons of time to read.
Sorry.
No, hey, I figure I get my slight digs in when I can, because I know I believe Brandyberry's a teacher too, so he's got off.
Yeah, he was he was texting me today telling me he was golfing, not to rub it in.
Oh, well, for anybody out there that's listening to this Friday morning at work, I'm not at work. I'm on the golf course. So
there you go.
As I say, I'm going to rub it into my own a little bit. But again, if you want to listen to any podcast live that we're doing, whether that's the Minor League Report, whether that's Weekend Update, whether it's the main podcast, Extra Innings, just go to tribetimenow.com/live. Check out the Twitter. That's the best place to find out when we're going to go live. It's updated, usually 10, 20 minutes before live time. And then if you want to subscribe, obviously tribetimenow.com/subscribe. You can subscribe to any of our podcasts. And again, we have our affiliates, our guest hosts from Everybody Hates Cleveland, Indians Baseball Insider. It's pronounced Lajaway, Boarding River Baseball. Did the Tribe win last night? So we have a ton of great people doing great things with all of our guest hosts. I implore you to make sure that you go there and read what they're doing. It's obviously some of the best content in Cleveland. It's better than what you're going to get on ESPN, whatever. So yeah, let's see. Special note, the tweet up that we had scheduled for July 11th has been canceled due to technical difficulties. It's just been a hodgepodge / cluster in terms of a couple aspects issues. So we're going to cancel it. We're going to take the entire off season and we'll plan it and get it ready. And we'll have a year under our belt. It'll be rearing and ready to go. We're going to be excited to do it in 2016. So if you plan on coming to the tweet up at Hoople's Bar and Riverside Cafe and the Flats on 1930 Columbus Road on July 11th, please don't. Stay at home. Open a beer for me. Relax. We will not be doing that. We may have an informal tweet up at some time here in the summer. Not sure about that. We will obviously tweet it out, Facebook it, whatever, when that happens. So If you want to get at me, rtopak13 on the Twitter. If you want to get at Jim, it's at Jim Pete EHC. That's JimPeteEHC on Twitter. He's very interactive on Twitter. If you tweet him, he will tweet you back. I'll pick my battles. And then if you want to email us at all here at the podcast, it's ryan@tribetimenow.com. That's my email at tribetimenow.com. And then if you just want to comments, questions, concern for the general website or anything in particular, just feedback at tribetimenow.com. So, Jim, I'll leave you here with a little bit of time. Do you want to talk about some things that are coming on? I know earlier you mentioned that there was an article coming out about, was it Lindor?
Yeah, we've got a piece coming out tomorrow at some point on the Indians roster and exactly what I was talking about that ground ball dependent pitcher and how that's going to change from Mike Hattery. So make sure you check out for that. And then I had a piece up today talking about Carrasco, just about how yesterday as a Cleveland fan was a really good day. Kind of exclamation point put on it by Carlos Carrasco in 9 2/3. Surprisingly enough, we didn't even talk about that. We got Carlos Carrasco 1 out away, and gosh, you say 1 out away in Cleveland history, and boy, that sure says a lot. But 1 out away from a no-hitter, but still, just a phenomenal reaction to what he did do yesterday. Carlos Carrasco, what a different place he is than he was a year ago. I have a piece on that's up there right now.
All right, so make sure you get over to everybodyhatescleveland.com. Check out Jim's piece on Cookie Carrasco, and then kind of the ground ball pitcher aspect and what it brings. That's coming out tomorrow, you said?
Yeah, tomorrow.
All right, so make sure that's by Mike Hattery. He's a great follow on Twitter if you haven't followed him yet, and he's a great writer. Really has insight into the game. So make sure you get over to Everybody Hates Cleveland. Check out his articles. Listen to our podcast. It'll be fun. We've got 1 week coming up here. Then the All-Star break. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be fun. So with that, Jim, thank you very much, and we'll see you later.